First News with Keeler in the morning on WIBX and WIBX950.com.
Could today be the day? The governor's his legal staff was out trying to salvage everything on Friday afternoon, and it was a debacle. Mm-hmm. They did it. They had three attorneys, including the governor's personal attorney, and they had planned it to be out at 1:30. So we're all sitting there, we're watching, we're waiting for it to happen, and 1:30 goes by, it wasn't ready. So completely unorganized. Then they finally get it up, and they go to, all right, let's go to the governor's personal attorney, and Julie, or whatever her name was, you're muted. I think you're muted there. Oh. And this is what we're watching on TV. And then she finally began to talk, and then I think Julie's froze. Yeah, I think she's frozen. Julie? Okay. And then the TV, I think it was Spectrum I was watching, they broke away. What a mess, right? If you're going to hold one of these things and you're trying to fix the governor's image, I think you got to fix your internet connections before you go with the press conference.
Yeah.
Luke Perry is standing by right now from Utica College. Luke, I don't know if you saw that, but it was a bit of a debacle to start.
Good morning. It all comes back to Spectrum, huh?
It does. It always does, doesn't it? It's funny. Yeah. So, and I wonder, right? Albany's a Spectrum market right there. So, maybe it was Spectrum's fault. Here the guys are on Spectrum blaming the internet when they're the ones that supply it. Interesting. Okay, what do you think happens here?
Well, it's certainly not a good situation for the state, the office of governor, or for Governor Cuomo. I think he's unlikely to resign, though that's what I would advise him to do on principle.
Yeah.
He would have done that already if that was going to be his move. So I think he's trying to calculate how he could potentially shift public opinion more in his direction as the report becomes more a thing of the past, and he's got some built-in time because assuming the legislature moves forward with impeachment, that's going to be a month or two process. So I think he's digging in, trying to calculate the best way to make that happen because he's lost all other leverage.
Well, now you're having long-lasting things that are occurring, such as his right-hand person, Melissa DeRosa. Yeah, or his accomplice, whatever that might be. But, somebody very important to him, very close to him, has now resigned. That's a big move that came yesterday.
Politics is a team sport in America, and once your own party turns against you, you're really on an island. And then, as you point out, to make matters worse, when your internal circle sees the writing on the wall and doesn't want to be on the ship when it sinks.
Yeah.
I think you're in even more trouble. So he's certainly in a very difficult spot and unlikely to survive, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know how he could survive this. So what can they do to move along the impeachment process? You think that'll be a conversation they have today, I would assume?
Yes, I think the Judiciary Committee will try to begin the process most likely as soon as possible. And then what I'm looking for is obviously the vote in the Assembly. You've got this dynamic where many members in the legislatures on both sides, the Assembly and the Senate, have said that Cuomo should resign. Not the same exact number has said they would vote to impeach or remove him, and that's really where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
So I do think the support is there, but that's a little bit of the dynamic to watch. And after the Assembly votes, it'll have to wait 30 days before the Senate can proceed, and that's where you get this at least month or so timeline.
Yeah. I would think though that if you're Andrew Cuomo, and I do believe what we're dealing with is somebody that's such a narcissist that I don't think he thinks he did anything wrong. I think in his mind he believes that he did nothing wrong. That this is all made up and people out to get him. But I would think that in his mind also, he would want to avoid any impeachment. So even if he were to resign down the road and they begin the impeachment process, the state now is focusing all of its efforts. I don't want to say all, but we saw it happen with President Trump. Now all of the attention, all of the work, a good deal of it is going to be pointed towards this. all at a time when we're in the middle of a pandemic, trying to rebound from a crisis. There's money that's got to be distributed out there. There's just a lot of stuff that has to get done. This is a very difficult time. I can't imagine he'd want to be doing it and be in the impeachment process.
Certainly not ideal. I think he's probably measuring the prospects for his political survival versus his ability to manage his legacy and thinking of his time in office as a whole.
Yeah.
And, I mean, someone who has reached the heights of power that he has, it's got to be difficult to be forced to let go of that, either by his own choice or through an impeachment proceeding. So, I mean, it's not surprising to me that that's taking time to sink in. I don't want to speculate on what's in his head or his motivations, but certainly he's thinking very strategically at this point about what his options are and weighing those. And I think he probably, in his own calculation, doesn't think there's a rush to move forward because he knows there's no way he can be ultimately removed for several weeks. But you're right, he still has a lot of formal power as chief executive of the state, and we are now dealing with the next phase of the pandemic here. But his informal power is at an all-time low. So it is this odd dichotomy where he still retains a lot of power and discretion, but everybody knows that his time is limited.
Interestingly enough, I always, in the last few days, especially since the AG's report came out, been looking at the news email to see how press releases are sent out or notices from the governor's office is sent out. Now he's gone back to his typical, governor updates the state on COVID numbers, and Governor Cuomo says this, and almost like nothing's changed from the governor's press office.
That kind of happened when this story first broke, right? And they were calling for him to resign back then. This is taking a new turn. It's every day something new is coming out. DeRosa steps down yesterday. Big news for Governor Cuomo. Today, the CBS network has the interview with one of the alleged victims who is going to tell her story. That's another part of this that won't be really good. And then, there's the thought of the legacy, his legacy, and the family legacy. I can't imagine that his mom, Matilda, is not in his ears at this point saying,
I don't understand.
This isn't good. This isn't good for the family.
He was doing the COVID updates, and he was saying things like he talked to his mother, and Andrew does the impression much better than I can even put an effort forward. But, she said this, or I got to do this, and I would just love reenactment of him from what his mother says about these allegations and the fact that he probably should resign immediately.
So, and Luke, I guess we're talking about the human aspect of this. He's still a human being, and there's got to be people around him that are trying to guide him here. We certainly know his brother was doing that at one point.
Yes, and if we're going to talk about humanity, I think, of course, we have to recognize the humanity of the victims here in this situation as well, in addition to his individual psychology. From the perspective of state government, it's hard to lead with any issue when you don't want to be out in front of the public because you don't want to answer questions. And so I think that's really handicapping his ability as governor to address the pandemic or a variety of other challenges. So at some point, he's going to have to come out of that shell. But it's going to be, as we talked about, the challenges of managing personal scandal with trying to do the business of the state.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not. When I say the human aspect of this, I'm simply saying that I'm not defending him by any means. I'm simply saying that he's got to have someone in his ear. There's got to be some feelings of, I'm destroying the entire family name here. That part of it, I think, is the human aspect that could make him come to a conclusion that we might not expect him to actually come up with based on this narcissistic attitude that we feel he has. Does that make any sense?
It does, and I certainly wasn't implying you were doing otherwise. I also tend to think that if you engage in these types of behaviors, you don't care too much about perception or image, and so if you're that far down that road, I don't know how much those family image concerns are tugging at you at this point.
A good point.
Maybe who knows?
Yeah. His mother's got to be telling him that you're kind of ruining your father's name. I heard somebody say something. Two quick thoughts. I heard somebody say something over the weekend that I thought was funny. Governor Cuomo woke up on third base and thought he hit a triple. Didn't realize that his father placed him there. And then the other part was, I guess it's more of a thought. I don't know whether he thinks he did something wrong or not, but I actually think that even though these women were in their mid-20s, that he feels like this was an opportunity for them. Like they should feel lucky that a handsome
that's why I don't
governor
believe he believes anything that he did was wrong.
would give them the time of day.
That tends to be the narcissistic traits. These
and
are
is it
traits
possible
of somebody's a narcissist.
That Mrs. Cuomo is taking the role of, no, my son could never do that. I can't believe that he would do that.
It is all possible. Yeah, and Luke, that would be part of the human story here. So if there are people in his ear that he's close to, and maybe it's mom, where he can do no wrong, that could also be a part of this story. It's just somewhere along the line, he's still a human being and will make human moves. I feel like we could get surprised, and maybe it's because I'm calling for him to resign, thinking he's going to resign. I don't know. What about Kathy Hochul? How does she move forward? She came out very, very aggressively against the governor here.
Well, I just to harken back to one point of the previous discussion, if I may, I'd like to share that I think what elected officials say, as you guys know, isn't always what's on their mind or what's going on.
Yep.
So, particularly when it comes to strong defiance of wrongdoing, typically in a situation like this where there's smoke, there's fire, and obviously there's a report documenting all this. So even though the governor is denying any culpability, I don't necessarily think that's believable or his mindset. Now, in terms of the lieutenant governor, I think all preparations are being made internally to prepare to take over if that situation should arise.
All right, Luke, interesting stuff. We'll see where we go today. That bombshell last night with Melissa DeRosa stepping down. It's going to be incredible to see the victim all over the news today telling her story. That means it probably is not going to be a good day for Cuomo. We'll see.
Thanks so much.
All right, I appreciate your time. Luke Perry from Utica College. Wow.